Dominic King on BBC Radio Kent.
Parking can be one of the most stressful parts of a trip to the shops, finding change for that machine, downloading those apps to get a ticket online, and it's often all against the clock. Private parking firms have pledged to update their rules to ensure drivers aren't penalised if they don't pay to park within 5 minutes. It's all because of Rosie Hudson, who was taken to court last year after racking up a fine of nearly £2,000 for taking more than 5 minutes to pay for parking.
When I went to pay through the online system, I couldn't access any signal. The only time I could get signal was once I was in the building where I worked. I got receipt, proof of payment to say, yes, you've paid for a full day's parking, 12 hours per day. They still seem to believe that because I haven't paid within that 5-minute grace period, I'm expected to pay a fine.
Now, in December, the parking company dropped its case against Rosie, but said the car park signage was clear about the 5-minute rule. Today, the firm has been back in touch with the BBC to say it still disputes Rosie's version of events and says on one occasion she took 3 hours to pay for parking. The British Parking Association says it'll revise the rules around payment difficulties by next month. They're aiming to carry out a review of the parking in the private sector by April. But there are loads of us, I'm sure, who've had problems with our parking. Maybe you got a fine and you felt like, well, you shouldn't have. Scott Dixon, aka the Complaints Resolver, is a consumer and motoring disputes expert. He's live with me on BBC Radio Kent this morning. Hello.
Hiya, Dominic. How are you?
I'm really well. So why then, Scott, are more of us getting sort of caught out, really, doing something as simple as parking a car?
Well, the first thing I need to point out, Dominic, is a private parking operator cannot fine you. So what they do is they issue invoices for an alleged breach of contract for parking on private land, whereas councils issue fines for infringements on public highways like parking in bus lanes and on WL lines. And to answer your question, it's the ANPR cameras that trigger these parking tickets. So this 5-minute rule, for example, as soon as you pass an ANPR camera, the clock starts ticking.
And they're the ones that basically can recognise your plate?
Yeah, that's right. So the car park may be busy, you may have trouble finding a space, and then you've got to go to the trouble of downloading the app, reading the signs, the terms and conditions, entering your car registration details. You may have problems getting a Wi-Fi signal. And to give you an example, Kaylee on BBC Radio Derby earlier this morning took her 7.5 minutes to do all that, which is way outside of this 5-minute rule, which should be abolished because there is already a 10-minute grace period within this new industry code of practice to give you a consideration and grace period to read the signs and comply with the terms and conditions.
I mean, that's one of the problems, isn't it? That you go around a car park and many car parks have different companies that represent them. You know, we've all got them. I'm sure many of us have got like 3 or 4 apps on our phone to see. Now, which one is this? Is it the Ring one or is this the phone one or is this the, and they've all got different names. And that's the problem for a lot of people. Wherever you are, there's always something. Trying to get around a car park as well, navigating pedestrians walking past, all that must add up to time. There is some kind of ongoing talk about if it's a private car park, they can't chase you up as much as an authority-run car park. What's the truth in that?
They can't chase you up, and my advice would be not to ignore it. But, for example, if you get caught, I've spoken about this as well, Boxing Day sales, and 7 a.m. next Boxing Day sales. So the signage on the car park says you can't park before 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So, and a lot of motorists were caught out. But my advice, and this was followed, was to speak to Next, and they cancelled the tickets. So.
That's good then that a high street store would do that and make sure that they are saying, actually, you're right, that's not in this particular circumstance of Boxing Day and Christmas of the year just gone. Jesse from Ashford has been in touch. Let's have a listen in to what happened, Scott, and get your analysis on this.
Basically, I'm a scrap metal dealer licensed with Ashford Council, and I got called to, I think it was a cafe in Ashford Town Centre, and there's a little car park at the back, like a little private car park for the businesses there, which included the CAF and maybe a couple of other businesses. But obviously there was no parking sign, but I was loading. I stopped in the middle of the car park. I didn't pull up in a bay because I was collecting a cooker. I didn't see any signs saying you can't load. obviously no parking, but I didn't see nothing saying about loading. And then the shopkeeper said it was fine, but they always do. And I was arguing back and forth with the not the parking fine company. It was the debt collectors. I never received the first letter from the parking fine company themselves. The first letter I ever received was from a debt collector with an increased fee, and then I was arguing with both of them, both companies. They just bounce you off each other for ages, and then it goes to court, and they put a CCJ on me, which if you pay it within 30 days, they remove the CCJ. So that's what I've done. I think I lodged an appeal against it, but it's criminal, some of it really, and it's extortionate fees that you get charged £200-300 or something I had to pay. When realistically I was just doing my job, and I don't even make £2 out of the oven that I collected from the business, and I proved to them that I had a council licence to collect, and they still ignored it.
So county court judgment for debt going on there. Jesse explaining his story, grace periods and all of that. Just what are your thoughts on what you heard?
Well, pointing back to the debt collector letters, you can safely ignore those because these debt collectors are third parties and they don't actually own the alleged debt. So they're classed as strangers to the debt. And this forms part of the business model to extract money out of you with menaces. But what Jesse could have done was submitted a data subject access request to the private parking operator in the first instance to retrieve all the evidence that they were relying on to take the case to court. So Jesse said that he didn't receive any of the paperwork, but if he submitted a data subject access request, the data that they are processing belongs to you, and you can retrieve that to see what they are actually relying on to take the case to court. And the shopkeeper should have stepped in and assisted to cancel it in line with what I said with Next earlier on.
Sure.
You know, the shopkeepers can step in and assist and get it cancelled. And yeah, this is a big problem because these third-party debt collectors, they don't actually own the debt. They're strangers to the alleged debt.
But when you get something come through the door, Scott, we get that point you made. But when we get someone come through, a letter come through the door and it's from a debt collector because you park somewhere, your natural instinct is to think, oh my goodness me, it's scary. It's scary stuff. Are they going to come to the door? They're going to try and take stuff from my house because, and in this case with Jesse, I know you don't know the individual case, but he hadn't seen it. Should you really be ignoring debt collector letters?
Well, third-party debt collectors, yes.
How do you know they're how will we know they're a third party? Just purely because we have to think about what that means, third party?
Well, yes. What you can't ignore is the letter before action, the letter before claim, which is the last stop before a case goes to court. But
gotcha.
These letters, it's just part of the business model to get you to pay up.
So in Jesse's case, he needs to just go direct to the person who runs that car park first, as opposed to the debt collector. Really good to have you on the show with us. Any thoughts you have about parking and fines, let us know. 08000 321 333, start with Kent. Find out more from Scott, aka the Complaints Resolver, on his website, thecomplaintsresolver.co.uk. It's BBC Radio Kent.